There is a specific, suffocating density of the air inside a contemporary commercial office building in Dallas when you realize the person you built your entire 20-year family business with has just quietly liquidated every client list and asset to fund an escape plan with his young mistress. It doesn't smell like a complex corporate legal dispute. It smells of polished quartz, expensive ergonomic furniture, and the faint, bitter trace of an exit transaction executed by the only partner you ever trusted with your life's savings. I remember the exact weight of the cold air in my chest as I stood near our main server bank on a quiet Friday evening, my eyes tracing a minor, microscopic anomaly in the way the man across from me, my supposed husband and business partner, handled the data transfers. There was no grand audience at that moment, no dramatic project projections, and no immediate tears. It was just the silent observation of an unexpected code modification and the terrifying realization that my husband had systematically emptied our 20-year business accounts to a paravan company, ready to disappear over the border within the hour. And as my brain decoded the parameters of his betrayal, realizing they believed my analytical mind was too distracted by commercial audit data to notice the exit codes, the silence that settled over my skin was absolute. Let me show you how a precise, detail-oriented woman can stand in a designer boardroom on a Tuesday evening and execute a systematic, unresolvable legal devastation that completely liquidates a multi-million-dollar fraud. My name is Avery. I'm 42 years old. If you saw me analyzing corporate compliance logs behind the dual monitors at a prominent Texas legal and data consulting firm, you would see a highly precise, completely methodical woman. I have striking, dark auburn hair that I keep meticulously styled in neat waves, sharp emerald green eyes that have spent years auditing complex financial transactions, and a life measured entirely by the unyielding laws of data verification and documentation. I didn't inhabit a chaotic, disorganized world where things happened by accident. My home was a high-end contemporary ranch overlooking the valley, a space built on 20 years of absolute simple devotion and rigid domestic and business routine. I believed that this transparent, unvarnished routine was a total shield against the complex, deceptive malice of the world around us. My husband, Liam, was 42. He was a senior logistics consultant and managing director whose charm was smooth, professional, and highly effective. He was broad-shouldered, with a wardrobe full of custom-tailored suits, dark hair that he kept perfectly faded, and a calculated, confident laugh that made him immensely successful with high-net-worth clients at the local country clubs. He was the model of a dedicated, ambitious provider. He spent his weekends reviewing supply chain metrics, he never missed a client dinner, and he returned to our office every evening with a tired but structured smile, kissing my forehead before reviewing our weekly logistical assets. He always positioned himself as the primary architect of our future security, constantly reminding me that his exhausting navigation of global trade routes was the only mechanism expanding our lifestyle. I trusted that sharp, professional pride implicitly. He wasn't a reckless gambler. He was a man who lived by logistical software and numbers, and I believed that a man whose entire career depended on strict regulatory compliance couldn't possibly possess the chaotic, reckless cruelty required to forge his own identity inside his own company. But over the last quarter, the operational dynamics inside our company began to display minor, erratic fluctuations. Liam's ordinary logistical shifts began extending late into the dark Texas nights. He would text me at 6 p.m., claiming a massive international supply chain audit backlog or an emergency commercial fleet acquisition was forcing him into mandatory midnight group work. When he finally pulled his luxury vehicle into our garage at 1:30 a.m., his jacket didn't just smell of leather upholstery, high-end cologne, and expensive corporate lounges. It carried a distinct chemical sweetness, the heavy, unmistakable scent of a specific luxury perfume that didn't match the clean, unscented products I required inside our living and office space. I didn't jump to frantic conclusions or initiate emotional confrontations. In my line of work, a suspicion without data is an invalid entry. I set his late-night protein meals aside, logged my hours for the firm, and kept the household operating with total, silent efficiency. I offered him an absolute, unvarnished loyalty, completely unaware that the man sleeping beside me was using my calculated predictability to map out an unthinkable domestic and business deception. The conceptual vulnerability in our corporate matrix was the perception of absolute shared trust. He believed that my focus was permanently external, auditing global compliance logs, entirely oblivious to the internal transaction history. Liam had spent months maintaining a front of absolute stability, constantly telling me that the slight drop in quarterly profits was due to market fluctuations and that we needed to remain patient. I remember sitting in our boardroom watching Liam review our firm's ethical codes and feeling a deep sense of security that I was married to a stable partner. I had no idea that while he was accepting praise for our business integrity, my husband was sitting in a paravan company's office downtown, looking at our optimized supply chain data and calculating a cold financial transaction that would liquidate every client list and asset, transferring it to a hidden account in Mexico within 5 days, so he could disappear with his young corporate assistant without triggering a single notification on our shared location applications. Trust inside a highly organized long-term business and domestic relationship is often the most fragile asset because we assume that a shared routine is proof of shared loyalty. When you are focused on verifying commercial data, you don't suspect your partner is using his own company to forge his physical exit strategy. Have you ever realized that someone was using your trust in their public integrity to commit a total fraud against your life? Tell me your experience below. The psychological audit initialized on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, precisely 24 hours after Liam supposedly initiated an emergency regional fleet acquisition in Houston. My shift at the law firm required me to leave our contemporary home strictly at 7 a.m., meaning my routine was completed before the morning traffic hit the highway. The man I had been running a company with for 20 years claimed his logistical meetings didn't initialize until the afternoon. I went to the company's digital server to verify our quarterly logistical client data, a standard protocol to validate the commercial matrix. I began noticing small domestic and business discrepancies that did not align with Liam's strict 20-year physical behavioral parameters. The main logistical interface displayed unexpected data transfers. The key corporate clients, our primary income stream, were suddenly bypassed. The man I had been running a company with was suddenly liquidating their specific project data. A structural anomaly materialized on the main screen, concealed beneath a false administrative coding transfer meant to bypass my standard auditing protocols. It didn't lead to a hostile takeover or a simple market crash. It led to an unimaginable commercial robbery executed by my own husband. He used my professional background as a weapon to make me doubt my own observation. Within 24 hours, he attempted to reinforce the illusion by bringing home an expensive bottle of wine, claiming he had consulted our corporate bank about an internal compliance review and delusional financial stress I had mentioned. "You're going to start focusing on the actual data, Avery," Liam ordered that evening, sliding the digital quarterly report across the court's nightstand. "I won't live in a house where my business partner monitors my hand movements every time I work double shift or change my coffee habits. If you're going to treat our 20-year company like a corporate audit, it's going to drive a wedge between us that we can't fix." The physical threat was clear. He wanted my brain sedated so the exit strategy could operate without friction.
He believed his gaslighting had been a total success, while my mind sharpened into a cold, predatory ledger. I began a complete digital verification of our life.
The forensic breakthrough materialized on Thursday afternoon. He was at the fleet acquisition meeting downtown on a cardio rehabilitation session, and I utilized my remote access codes to audit the localized cloud backup of our company's automated smart home and security system. I bypassed the main security portal and pulled the raw internal data logs from the hidden microphone sensors built into our office lighting fixtures. I ran a high-resolution vocal frequency comparison between the logistical data logs from 6 months ago and the audio logs from the past 3 days. The decibel levels and pitches were identical, but the linguistic syntax, the frequency of specific logistical filler words and sentence structures, showed a fundamental, catastrophic mismatch. It was an intentional, physical modification of reality, a total human forgery. I extended the audit to our shared cloud server, tracking the location history of Liam's secondary logistical tablet. The device had been logged out of the local network 5 days ago, but the automated background synchronization from a high-end resort network in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, had processed a single-file backup before the location services were manually killed. It contained an exit manifest and an automated photo backup. I sat down at my desk, the sound of the California rain hitting the panoramic windows above me, and I opened the folder. It wasn't a logistical conference report. It was a digital timeline of a complete lifestyle theft. The assistant's sharp, aggressive text threads filled the synchronized backup folder with a terrifying financial clarity. Liam, June 11th. The logistical data list is already organized. The corporate bank confirmed they don't audit the merchant source for paravan accounts under $20,000 if we classify the withdrawals as medical expense reimbursements. If we use the new LLC I established, she thinks she's just signing the county commercial insurance updates when I bring her those clipboards. She's so focused on the data, she doesn't even read the headers. Once the bonus settles in the Mexican account, we list the new address in Cabo and move our logistics there. She can move back upstate. She won't even realize the money is gone after taxes hit her name after graduation. Assistant, June 11th. Logistical data secured, bro. The new paravan company's digital ledger is already open. This girl lives like a machine. I'll play the part until Tuesday night to do the swap in the lobby before she returns from her late shift. Just make sure that corporate assistant of yours doesn't post any photos on public servers. If Avery audits the network logs, we're both dead. When you discover that your husband has substituted his own identical brother to act as a physical placeholder so he can cheat with impunity, the marriage terminates instantly. The deception loses all power because you hold the undeniable forensic blueprint of their fraud. If you found undeniable audio logs proving your partner swapped places with a twin to go on a secret vacation, would you scream at the stranger in your living room, or would you wait for the exact moment of their secret swap to drop the trap? Let me know below. My pulse remained completely flat. I didn't smash his ergonomic office equipment, I didn't confront his young assistant downtown, and I didn't shed a single tear over the digital data codes. The realization that my entire 20-year business sanctuary was a designed biological fraud stripped away every layer of emotional vulnerability, leaving only a cold mechanical drive for absolute financial and legal destruction. They believed my analytical nature made me blind to their physical reality, completely unaware that a commercial data specialist always catches the anomaly.
I compiled the digital vocal analysis, the synchronized Mexican network logs, the fraudulent data transfer codes, and the internal bank logs. I formatted the entire document into a comprehensive legal brief and forwarded it directly to the local commercial fraud division and a specialist criminal defense attorney who handled commercial identity theft, financial fraud, and unlawful asset transfer. When the attorney verified that the unauthorized data transfer and account liquidation using forged signatures constituted multiple felony offenses, I placed the files on a secure drive and waited for the scheduled transition night.
Tuesday evening arrived. It was the night Liam was scheduled to return from his Houston fleet acquisition and perform the final identity swap with his assistant before disappearing. They believed the transaction would be seamless, that Julian would slip away with his cash and Liam would step back into his luxury life without a single trace left behind. They didn't realize that I had adjusted my schedule. I didn't go to the logistical office that evening. Instead, I arranged a formal dinner meeting inside our contemporary home, inviting the senior commercial bank director from our bank, our family's logistical attorney, and the local county commercial fraud investigator. It was an intimate, elite gathering, the exact arena where Liam's professional and marital reputation was completely vulnerable. We sat around the quartz kitchen island at 7:30 p.m., the atmosphere quiet, upscale, and completely controlled. The front door lock turned, the heavy oak door opened. Liam walked into the home, wearing his custom-tailored travel overcoat, his posture confident, a smug smile on his face as he prepared to greet his clueless wife. He had completed his swap in the garage 10 minutes early, entirely confident that they were masterminds. The most effective retribution is executed when the perpetrators walk directly into the arena of their presumed victory, completely unaware that the trap is already sprung. Liam and Julian thought they had executed the perfect identity swap, entirely oblivious to the fact that his corporate boss was sitting at my table. Have you ever had to maintain a perfect, welcoming smile while counting down the seconds to a trader's public ruin? Tell me your story below.
The contemporary Texan home was illuminated by the soft, warm glow of the architectural track lighting. The quartz kitchen island was set with fine porcelain and polished silver, reflecting the twilight over the valley through the panoramic glass windows. The 6 people at the table turned their heads simultaneously as Liam froze on the threshold of the entryway. I wasn't wearing my casual commercial study attire or my faded work-from-home clothes. I sat at the head of the island wearing an incredibly striking, elegant, high-end white designer-tailored blazer with sharp, structured shoulders that caught the ambient light like a beacon. My dark auburn hair was styled in rich, flawless waves down my shoulders, and my green eyes held a terrifying razor-sharp clarity. My lips were painted a deep, commanding dark crimson. The casual greeting died in Liam's throat as his eyes moved from my white blazer to the bank director from our commercial bank sitting directly across from me. Liam's smooth, professional smile completely vanished. His knuckles turned white against his leather briefcase, a sudden primal panic flashing across his features as he saw the legal brief sitting open on the quartz table next to the wine glasses. "Avery, what is going on here?" Liam stammered, his voice cracking as he looked at the commercial investigator sitting behind me. "Why is my bank director sitting in our dining room?" "We are just completing the final quarterly commercial compliance audit, Liam," I said, my voice perfectly flat, carrying a cold, resonant echo that killed the remaining background classical music. "Your logistics partner, Madeline, has been exceptionally helpful in providing the behavioral data over the last 5 days. He even demonstrated your new left-handed habits for me." He tried to turn the brass handle of the front door, but his fingers were trembling so violently he dropped his keycard onto the floor.
Arthur, I continued, looking directly at Liam's logistical managing partner, your senior logistical consultant didn't attend a fleet acquisition in Houston. He was at a resort in Cabo using company travel accounts to cover a personal residency with his assistant, while this individual used his security credentials to access this building and sign household financial waivers using a forged identity. The room turned into a freezing, breathless vacuum. The logistical attorney adjusted his glasses, his fingers turning the pages of the synchronized text logs between Liam and Julian, his expression shifting into a deep, dark disgust as he read their calculations regarding our marital and business property assets. This is an explicit violation of our firm's moral turpitude clause and a demonstrable case of commercial identity fraud, Arthur said, his voice shaking with a quiet corporate fury as he stood up from the table. Your employment is terminated effective immediately, Liam. The firm's legal team will be cooperating fully with the fraud division. Liam lunged forward, his face twisted in a narcissistic, desperate rage, his hand rising to grab the collar of my white blazer. You crazy bitch, you audited my entire life. Before his fingers could make contact, 2 logistical security officers and a county deputy stepped out of the shadows of the home corridor. They had been waiting for the signal. They grabbed Liam's arms, forcing his face down onto the cold quartz surface of the kitchen island, clicking the steel handcuffs around his wrists in front of his entire church congregation. His young assistant was intercepted at the airport border crossing by a secondary federal marshal, her designer heels clicking pathetically against the concrete as she wept, her ambitious career completely shattered by the realization that her family trust was now facing a permanent state criminal record for identity theft and conspiracy. There were no flashing news cameras, just the cold, silent judgment of the commercial network they had tried to manipulate. 3 years have passed since that rainy Tuesday evening in the contemporary Texan home. The seasons returned to the southwest, but the layout of my world has been completely reorganized. Liam was convicted of felony commercial identity fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy. The state court, utilizing the absolute clarity of the vocal frequency analysis and the digital logs I provided, sentenced him to 6 years at a state correctional institution. His commercial credentials were permanently revoked. His name became a toxic liability across the entire Texas business network. His assistant, Madeline, filed for total personal bankruptcy to clear the massive restitution fines imposed by the bank and insurance, and quietly relocated to a distant town, working an entry-level manual sorting job at a regional warehouse, her professional career permanently erased by the fraud listing on her record. I kept the company and my absolute independence. I didn't liquidate the 20-year asset, and I didn't leave the commercial consulting world. I utilized the divorce settlement and the restitution payout to completely restructure my investments, ensuring that no external human element could ever breach my financial security again. I was promoted to the Senior Director of the Regional Historical Compliance Department, using my expanded salary to establish a local legal defense clinic that helps working-class families protect their property titles and assets from predatory partners and deceptive peers. I became the sole architect of my own security. One gray Thursday afternoon, as a cool breeze was pulling the fog across the Santa Monica Pier, I was sitting on a stone bench reviewing our department's digital audit structures on my tablet. The sound of a car engine idling caught my attention. A generic commercial transport van had stopped at the edge of my gravel driveway. A woman stepped out from the passenger side. She didn't have an umbrella or a modern designer handbag. She was dressed in a worn, faded warehouse uniform, her dark hair tied back with a cheap rubber band, her face gaunt and completely drained of its former ambitious energy. It was Madeline. She had returned to the county to sign her final parole structure documents at the municipal building. She stood near the edge of the asphalt, refusing to step onto my gravel path,
her hollow eyes staring up at the porch with an expression of profound, exhausted defeat. "Avery," she called out, her voice thin, cracked, and completely stripped of the sharp sarcasm she used to wield at my kitchen table. I just want my family's old research books back from your storage room. I have nothing left." I stood up slowly from my bench, walking to the top of the wooden steps. I was wearing my vibrant white designer-tailored blazer under a simple dark coat, the clean white fabric glowing against the gray wood of the porch, my emerald green eyes fixed on her face with absolute, unvarnished indifference.
The research material was liquidated 2 years ago to cover the financial tax liens your fraud left on this corporate title, Madeline, I said, my voice perfectly flat, carrying no anger or malice. The transaction was entirely legal, documented and approved by the State Oversight Committee. Your time has expired. Please, Avery, I lost absolutely everything, she whispered, standing by the edge of the muddy road. Liam keeps sending me letters from the correctional facility, trying to dump all the legal debts onto my shoulders. No one in this town will even look at me, and because of my criminal record, I can't work anywhere except a minimum wage warehouse job. You completely destroyed my life. Was it really worth it for your father's old house? I looked down from her from the porch, my voice shifting back into its cold, structural English finality. I didn't finish your life, Madeline. I simply allowed the county system to output the exact reality of the data you chose to enter into that design software. You chose to sit in my living room and forge my name while I was working to support your lifestyle. Enjoy the final compilation of your parameters. She didn't scream. She slowly realized that there was no human emotion left in my eyes for her to exploit. She stepped back into the transport van, the door sliding shut with a heavy metallic clank, and the vehicle drove away into the autumn fog, leaving the road completely empty. Liam remains inside the state facility, his appeals systematically denied by the district judge. Their names are just 2 erased entries in the county archive logs. Do you know why I am telling you this story from the porch of my father's newly repaired house? Because the predators and deceivers of this world want you to believe that if you are a regular working-class person who works an hourly shift and counts your pennies, you are too weak to defend your own life. They think that because you are quiet, because you ignore their small slights, you must be blind to their large conspiracies. They believe that a gaslighted heart will always collapse into useless tears. But they do not understand the absolute, unalterable laws of patience and documentation. Your life does not belong to the people who try to manipulate your trust using a fake medical crisis, and you don't need a corporate boardroom, a massive fortune, or a public stage to execute absolute justice. You just need the cold, silent discipline to collect the data, secure the evidence, and wait for the exact moment to let their own greed pull the trigger on their existence. Liam and Madeline thought they could steal my father's memory because I was an ordinary clerk. They forgot the most basic rule of the archives. The woman who manages the files always knows exactly where to bury the trash. I am Avery. The audit is finalized, the asset is secured, and my home finally stands on its own unshakable foundation. Now I have a final question for you, the person listening to my voice in the quiet of your own room tonight. If you discovered your husband had faked an identity swap using his identical brother to cover up his infidelity, would you lose your temper and scream at a stranger in an empty living room? Or would you wait patiently for their mandatory community fundraising meeting to drop the files and watch them get carried away in handcuffs in front of their neighbors? Tell me your strategy in the comments below. I am analyzing your logic.